Somewhere around 1390 BC, Amenhotep III, an Egyptian king, set out to build something that no ruler before him had ever attempted on this scale. Over 700 statues, all of the same goddess. No other deity in the entire span of Egyptian history received those many from one king. Most of those statues still exist, and to understand what they were actually for, you first have to understand what this goddess was believed capable of, and why an entire kingdom felt the need to keep her satisfied. Welcome. This is Mythology for you. Let's get into it. Sekhmet did not begin as an independent deity. She began as a response, a reaction created by the god Ra. In Egyptian mythology, Ra was both the sun god and the ruler of gods and humans. For a long period, his authority went unquestioned. But as Ra aged, that changed. Humans began to defy him. Some openly mocked him, believing an aging god no longer had the power to respond. When Ra learned of this, he was so furious that he responded by removing his own eye. In Egyptian belief, a god's eye wasn't simply an organ of sight. It functioned as an extension of that god's power, sometimes treated as an independent force in its own right. Ra sent his eye out into the world with a single instruction: punish humanity for what they'd done. The eye took form as a lioness. This detail matters, because lionesses were associated with the most dangerous hunters in the region, fast, precise, and almost always successful once they targeted something. That lioness became Sekhmet, a name drawn from the Egyptian word for power, often translated as the powerful one. Unlike most deities who grew into their roles over generations of belief, Sekhmet was created for exactly one task from the moment she existed. She began immediately, and she did not hold back. She tore through human settlements. She didn't stop at the people who had mocked Ra. She kept going, killing indiscriminately. And the myth is specific about one detail. She began drinking the blood of the people she killed. Ra had asked for a punishment. What he was watching unfold was closer to the annihilation of humanity altogether. He needed a way to stop her, and direct confrontation didn't seem like the right idea. So the gods came up with a plan. Beer. The gods brewed an enormous quantity of beer and dyed it red, so it looked like blood. Then they flooded a field with it, directly in Sekhmet's path. She found it, drank it, thinking it was blood, and she drank so much of it that she fell asleep. When she woke up, the bloodlust was gone. The myth doesn't frame this as forgiveness, or as a moment of Sekhmet recognizing what she'd done. It's framed almost like a switch turning off. One version of her ended in that field. Something else woke up in her place. This isn't a loosely preserved folktale. It comes from a specific text known as the Book of the Heavenly Cow, inscribed on the walls of royal tombs, including the tomb of Tutankhamun. Texts placed inside a king's tomb were considered essential for the afterlife. Including this myth there indicates that it was considered important enough to accompany a king into the afterlife. This is where Sekhmet diverges from most destructive figures across world mythology. In many traditions, a being like this either remains a monster permanently or is defeated and removed from the story entirely. Sekhmet did neither. After the bloodlust ended, Sekhmet's role in Egyptian religion didn't end with it. She continued to be worshipped, but as a different kind of figure, a healer. Statues of her consistently show a lioness head on a human body, often holding an ankh, the symbol of life. Both aspects of her are represented in the same image, rather than treated as separate or conflicting. The reasoning traces directly back to the myth itself. If Sekhmet was capable of near-total devastation, the Egyptians reasoned she must also control the mechanism behind it. If she remained calm, she was considered protective. If she didn't, she was associated with harm on a large scale. This dual identity shaped how she was worshipped for the rest of Egyptian history. Sekhmet's healing role extended into actual medical practice. Her priest functioned as some of the closest professionals ancient Egypt had to doctors. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest surviving medical texts in the world, refers directly to priests of Sekhmet as practitioners who treated wounds and studied illness. This connects back to her original role. Disease wasn't treated as separate from Sekhmet's destructive nature. It was considered an extension of it. As a result, the same goddess associated with plague was also the one Egyptians turned to in order to stop it. Egyptians didn't treat this myth as a completed story. They reenacted its ending every year through a festival where priests offered drink to statues of Sekhmet, directly referencing the red beer that had calmed her in the myth. The purpose was to keep her pacified before any destructive behavior could resurface. Sekhmet was also not worshipped as a fully separate figure from other goddesses. Egyptians frequently treated her as interchangeable with Bastet, a cat-headed goddess linked to protection and domestic life, and with Hathor, goddess of love and joy, as though all three represented different states of the same underlying force, rather than three separate deities. In some versions, it's specifically Hathor who becomes Sekhmet when Ra sends his rage out into the world and reverts once the bloodlust breaks. Her identity functioned less like a fixed character and more like a condition that could shift depending on how she was treated. Keeping Sekhmet calm was never treated as a finished task. It was something that had to be repeated indefinitely, which is exactly why an annual ritual existed in the first place. Amenhotep III statues may reflect that same idea, just built permanently in stone instead of repeated every year. So, to answer the question as to why Amenhotep III needed that many statues, there are two possible reasons behind the number. One is that Amenhotep III's reign is believed to have coincided with a period of illness affecting the region, possibly plague. So instead of relying on a yearly ritual, he may have built these statues as a permanent way to keep her calm. The other is his Jubilee festivals, ceremonies pharaohs held to renew their power and their right to rule. Sekhmet fit naturally into these, since she represented both destruction and healing. The same idea of renewal these ceremonies were built around. Each statue may have marked one specific ceremony held during his reign. Either way, this wasn't just respect. It was a king making sure a dangerous goddess stayed on his side. Sekhmet was never just a monster or just a healer. She was both, and Egyptians spent centuries making sure she stayed on the right side of that line. That's likely why her statues still outnumber almost every other god's. Let me know what you guys think about this. See you in the next one.